I bet that you don't confuse a Geo Metro with a Chevy Malibu. Or, what's another one? I bet you would be able to distinguish a Honda Civic from a Mercedes, right? They're both cars, but they're not at all the same car. Like, not by any stretch of the imagination, right? And yes, one is vastly superior to the other, right? You wouldn't confuse those two vehicles, but you would still call them both a car, right? Makes sense. Well then, why would you confuse Allah with Yahweh and with Jehovah when they quite clearly have three distinctly separate, different names, right? They're not at all the same God. This is, again, I'm going to harp on this because it needs to be driven home. This point needs to be driven home in the minds of people who are still confused about this for whatever reason, because it should be like plenty obvious. Allah al-Akbar does not translate to God is great. It says it right there. Allah is great. It doesn't say God, it doesn't say Yahweh, it doesn't say Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, it doesn't say Jehovah. It says Allah, right? Allah is great, not God. So for people that are confused or who have heard this fallacy repeated in the media or maybe even by their pastors or or Muslims, well-meaning or otherwise, let me just set the record straight for you. If you go to an imam and you ask him to describe the attributes and qualities of Allah, and then you take those attributes and qualities and you match them up, do a side-by-side comparison of the attributes and qualities of, say, Yahweh, the Christian God, or Jehovah, the Jews' God, right? You would find that the qualities and attributes of Allah are very, very different. Like, not even remotely the same, not by any stretch of the imagination, is Allah similar to, not even remotely similar to Yahweh or Jehovah, right? They're three distinctly separate and vastly different deities. Now, yes, you could say that all three of them are gods. That's the common word that you use to describe those. But not all gods are the same, just like not all cars are the same, right? So I fail to understand how it's possible that especially Christians will say, oh, Allah Akbar just means God is great. It's just the Arabic word for God is great. And they say that as if, and I believe many of them actually genuinely believe this incredibly, as if Allah is the same God that they worship. And it's not. It's not at all. Now, you might find Muslims here or there that will tell you, oh yeah, it's the same God. They're either lying to you or they don't know any better. Okay? Christians, you should know better. In fact, I think you do know better. I think you just deny it. Right? Jews, you absolutely know better, especially if you're an Orthodox Jew. Right? You don't participate in a function in which the central deity is Allah, do you? You never have. If you're a Jew, you know better than to set foot in a mosque. You know better than to get into a conversation with a Muslim about God, because you are perfectly well aware that you are talking about two completely different gods. Okay, Jews for the most part, at least in my experience, are well aware of this. Christians, what gives? Why aren't you up with the times here? You see, the reason I address Christians primarily is because it's Christians that are being persecuted again, the world over. Not just in the Muslim world, but right here in the United States. Now, I'm obligated because of my genes. That's right, my DNA. I'm obligated to defend you, Christians, because I am the product of the values that come out of Christendom. So even though I myself personally am an atheist, I still have to recognize where my genes come from, where my good genes come from. I still have to recognize the culture that produced those genes. And if I want to keep them pure and pass them on, then I have to acknowledge that my genes are the result of generation after generation of Christians with a certain set of values who passed those values on to their children and then on to their children and so on until here I am. Now, of course, here in the United States, it's a totally different situation. I mean, it's precisely the fact that I am Celtic or European, blonde hair, blue-eyed, red beard, that sort of thing. It's precisely the fact that I'm white that I'm unable to pass my genes on in the purest manner possible. In other words, get together with another white woman and make white babies. It's impossible in the United States because there's just such an anti-Christian, anti-white sentiment. I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know any white chicks that don't hate white men. I would love to meet them. I don't know any. I mean, in fact, I'm not sure I have ever even met one. Ever. Here in the United States. Right. Now, of course, I'm going to be called racist, because I want to preserve my genes. I want to preserve my ethnic, ancestral heritage. I know, it's a sin, huh? Every other culture, every other color, every other race in the world gets applauded for wanting to do exactly what I want to do and exactly what other white people like me want to do, except because we're white, we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to. We're ostracized, demonized, called racist, called supremacist, called bigoted. You know the score. So I just want to drive the point home to Christians, specifically conservative, straight, white Christians. You need to man up. You need to grow a set of balls, and you need to start calling the God of Islam by his real name, which is Allah. Allah is not your God. Allah is your God's enemy. And you need to start defending your God. You need to start defending your culture, your ethnicity, your heritage, your genes. And you need to start reproducing, because Allah commands Muslims to outbreed you. Yes, this is true, and you know it's true. You better start doing something about it, or, as the left would have their way, it will be true in another century that the whole world is brown. You can't just play nice anymore. Christianity, the time for playing nice has come and gone. You need to man up and start the Crusades again. And this time, finish the job.